Okay, I think we're live. And today I just wanted to tackle Surah 60, which is entitled the Examine One. It's usually called the Examine Woman. And IGW. Yeah, it's a little late. It's I Nate and Michelle. Hi. Uh, but it's about basically this woman called Kulthum, who was a Muslim woman who fled Mecca. And this is a good surah to debunk the notion that Muhammad abided by treaties or that he was actually faithful in any sort of diplomatic or military engagements. He actually abided by the rule of law because there was an existing treaty between Mecca and Medina whereby if someone fled to that city from Mecca to Medina or vice versa, they would be returned to their families. And Kulthum, who was a uterine half sister of the Caliph Uthman, I believe, she was sheltered by Muhammad and taken in. And even after her family asked for her to be returned, he refused. So he was blatantly violating this treaty, just like he violated the treaties he made with the Medinan Jewish tribes, the treaties he made with the Quraysh. Almost every single treaty he made, he broke. So he was an oath breaker. That was one of the defining characteristics of Muhammad as a political and military ruler. He went back on his oath and broke treaties repeatedly, and this is a great example. And of course, he tries to justify this, and the justification is that she would have trouble living among polytheists, as the Muslims describe them. She would have trouble living among the people in Quraysh who are not Muslim. So, but when others broke oaths, he went berserk. Yeah, that's completely true. He was a hypocrite. That was also one of the defining features of Muhammad and his adult life, the hypocrisy. So in verse 1, it says, "O you who believe, do not take my enemy and your enemy for friends. Would you offer them love while they deny what has come to you of the truth, driving out the apostle and yourselves because you believe in Allah, your Lord? If you go forth struggling hard in my path and seeking my pleasure, would you manifest love to them? And I know what you conceal and what you manifest. And whoever of you does this, he indeed has gone astray from the straight path." And you can contrast this with what's you can contrast this with the advice that Jesus gives and his apostles, true apostles of God, in the Gospels and in the Pauline epistles. So in Matthew 43, it says, ye have heard that it hath been said, thou shalt love thy neighbor and hate thine enemy. But I say unto you, love your enemies, bless them that curse you, do good to them that hate you, and pray for them which despitefully use you and persecute you, that ye may be the children of your Father which is in heaven. For he maketh his sun to rise on the evil and on the good, and sendeth rain on the just and the unjust. For if ye love them which love you, what reward have ye? Do not even the publicans the same? And if ye salute your brethren only, what do ye more than others? Do not even the publicans so? Be ye therefore perfect, even as your Father which is in heaven is perfect. And the publicans in this case were the tax collectors, the people employed by the Roman government to dun the Jews living in in Israel who were universally reviled, not only because they worked for the Roman authorities, but because they used their positions to exploit and take advantage of their fellow Jews. So this is why when Zacchaeus has this epiphany and comes to Christ, he promises to give back all of the ill-gotten good goods that he's taken from people as a tax collector, and in fact give back more than he's taken. And Muhammad is the typical example of this mentality of not of just doing good to people as a sort of reciprocal arrangement in exchange for them doing something for you. And this is the real cleavage between believing in God and embracing a biblical morality and following the Quran, the dictates of the Quran, because before the law of Moses, there wasn't really something that existed that was akin to the golden rule. You had a negative version of the golden rule. Don't do things to people that you wouldn't want done to yourself. But when you think about this, this is something that comes naturally to human beings. They will avoid harming someone or doing something bad to another person because they don't want that done to themselves. Anyone who's not a literal sociopath or a psychopath can understand that mentality, because you don't want bad things to happen to you. But when you get to the Pentateuch and Leviticus, it says not only that, but you should really do not only avoid doing things that are harmful to other people, but actually do do what you would want done to you. And Jesus emphasizes this part part of the law, and says, do this even if you don't expect any sort of even if you don't expect to receive that in kind. Say you're doing something for someone that's very selfish and not really uh, you don't really expect any benefit to that. You should still do it. And this is what he's trying to get across in this passage. And you find this throughout the Bible. So in Romans 12, for example, um, in Romans 12:17, it says, recompense to no man evil for evil, provide things honest in the sight of all men. If it be possible, as much as lieth in you, live peaceably with all men. Dearly beloved, avenge not yourselves, but rather give place unto wrath. For it is written, vengeance is mine, I will repay, saith the Lord. Therefore, if thine enemy hunger, feed him. If he thirst, give him drink. For in so doing, thou shalt heap coals of fire upon his head. And here he's quoting the Psalms. Be not overcome of evil, but overcome evil with good. And this is something that is inherent in the Bible, this idea of not overcoming evil with evil, but it's something that's encouraged by Muhammad. Yeah, Alexander the Great, or Dul Qarnayn, is mentioned in the Quran, and that's where you get the verse about the sun setting in a muddy puddle, or in my copy it says the sea, which, if you think about it, is even more absurd. The idea that the sun can be submerged in a body of water using the ocean is even more silly than the idea of it setting inside of a puddle, because the idea that the sun could be that that the sun setting is the sun actually being submerged into the water, um, which is what you see visually. It's uh, an illusion like the sun going into the sea. But yeah, that's Dulcarnain was um, is Alexander the Great. Although some Muslims will say it's Cyrus, but again, that's also ridiculous. That doesn't buttress their claims because Cyrus was not a Muslim. He was just like Abraham was not a Muslim. Cyrus was, um, depending on what sources you believe, was either an atheist or a Zoroastrian, and he believed in religious pluralism. But again, he was not a prophet of Islam any more than Alexander the Great was. But I just wanted to emphasize that point, the idea that the golden rule in an affirmative sense, not a negative sense. That's something that you get directly from the law of Moses and from the Bible. And it's something that Jesus affirms and even enhances in some ways. So in 2, it says, if they find you, they will be your enemies and will stretch forth towards you their hands and their tongues with evil, and they ardently desire that you may disbelieve. Your relationship would not profit you nor your children on the day of resurrection. He will decide between you, and Allah sees what you do. Indeed, there is for you a good example in Ibrahim and those with him when they said to their people, surely we are clear of you in what you serve besides Allah. We declare ourselves to be clear of you, and enmity and hatred have appeared between us and you forever, until you believe in Allah alone, but not in what Ibrahim said to his father. I would certainly ask forgiveness for you, and I do not control for you aught from Allah, our Lord. On thee do we rely, and to thee do we return, and to thee is the eventual coming. And again, this is all embroidered and fabricated. Um, Abraham, again, was not a Muslim. He did not know who Allah was, because Allah is a pagan Arabic deity. Now, there were pagan gods and among the Semitic peoples, and I'm sure he was exposed to that. And in fact, the kernel of truth here is that Abraham came from a pagan family. His father Terah and his family were, uh, I believe they may have even made pagan idols or crafted pagan idols, but they came from Ur, which was a which was a polytheistic area, and Abraham was called out of Ur, and he was chosen by God as the first of his elect people. But all of these other things, so he did reject the polytheism of his fathers, but that doesn't mean that he believed in Allah, much less that he told other people to believe in Allah. But also, the idea that Muhammad is trying to convey is simply not true. That God wanted him to be in perpetual warfare with non-Jews and people that did not believe in Yahweh. This idea is simply not accurate. God wanted Israel to be set apart, to be separate from the world, but that doesn't mean that Muhammad's prescription of waging war and attacking and not and planning and plotting their destruction, that's something that God endorses. So in 5, it says, Our Lord, do not make us a trial for those who disbelieve, and forgive us. Our Lord, surely thou art the mighty, the wise. Certainly there is for you in them a good example for him who fears Allah in the last day, and whoever turns back, then surely Allah is the self-sufficient, the praised. It may be that Allah will bring about friendship between you and those whom you hold to be your enemies among them. And Allah is powerful, and Allah is forgiving, merciful. So here there's an, seemingly an olive branch extended to non-Muslims. And it continues in verse 8. Allah does not forbid you respecting those who have not made war against you on account of your religion and have not driven you forth from their homes, that you show them kindness and deal with them justly. Surely Allah loves the doers of justice. Allah only forbids you respecting those who made war upon you on account of your religion and drove you forth from your homes and backed up others in your expulsion, that you make friends with them, and whoever makes friends with them, these are the unjust. Now this is really pivotal because it hinges on them making war against Allah, i.e., attacking Muhammad and his followers. Hi, Roxby. And that's really what it hinges on, the Muslim definition of making war. Muhammad was allowed to preach more or less unobstructed. He was allowed to proselytize for a decade, for 10 years, unmolested in Mecca before he was forced to leave. He was forced into exile, so to speak. But he was basically allowed to proselytize for 10 years. Now imagine any Muslim country, or most Muslim countries, particularly in the Gulf, which is run by Wahhabism, this really austere, inflexible, revanchist type of Islam. Imagine going to one of these countries, particularly Saudi Arabia, where Muhammad was, going to Mecca and preaching the gospel for 10 minutes, let alone 10 years. You would probably be detained, assuming you weren't attacked or assaulted by civilians. You'd probably be detained by the Mutaween, or 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 arrested at the most after a half hour, an hour, but probably within a matter of minutes you'd be detained. Muhammad was allowed to do this, to preach his new religion for 10 years before they did anything, to squelch his voice, or to stop him from proselytizing. So Muhammad's conception of people attacking Islam or assaulting Islam is very skewed, and it's misleading when you read it. When you listen to Muslims today, you hear them talk about him having garbage thrown at him as he was praying. This is the big assault or attack. Someone supposedly scattered garbage onto him or his followers while they were praying, and this is seen as a great assault. Compare that to what Muhammad's followers did to their opponents, which was summarily execute them, behead them, torture them, and then rob them, enslave their wives and their young girls, their daughters. Compare the two, and you have to do that in order to understand how misleading these passages are, where he says will be Allah might allow you to have friendship, but only if you don't attack Muslims. So in 9 it says, Allah only forbids you respecting those who made war upon you, and drove you forth from your homes and backed up others in your expulsion. that you make friends with them, and whoever makes friends with them, these are the unjust. O you who believe, when believing women came to you flying, then examine them. Allah knows best their faith, and if you find them to be believing women, do not send them back to the unbelievers. Now again, he's breaking the treaty by doing this, and he's justifying breaking this treaty. This is the heart of the surah. Neither are these women lawful for them, nor are those men lawful for them, and give them what they have spent, and no blame attaches to you in marrying them when you gave them their dowries, and hold not to the ties of marriage of unbelieving women, and ask for what you have spent, and let them ask for what they have spent. That is Allah's judgment. He judges between you, and Allah is knowing, wise. Now, in terms of marriage, marrying unbelieving women, Muhammad had all sorts of concubines and sex slaves who were not Muslim, and this was the carve out that he used. And this is something that the now deceased ISIS leader practiced, and he enslaved women who weren't Muslim and young girls who were Yazidi, a female social worker who was later executed. So ISIS and Al Qaeda, or Boko Haram, who's kidnapped hundreds of young girls in Nigeria, they're simply adopting the practices that Muhammad engaged in. And in 11, it says, and if anything out of the dowries of your wives has passed away from you to the unbelievers, then your turn comes. Give to those whose wives have gone away the like of what they have spent, and be careful of your duty to Allah in whom you believe. O Prophet, when believing women come to you giving you a pledge that they will not associate aught with Allah, and will not steal, and will not commit fornication, and will not kill their children, and will not bring a calumny which they have forged of themselves, and will not disobey you in what is good, accept their pledge, and ask forgiveness for them from Allah. Surely Allah is forgiving, merciful. O you who believe, do not make friends with the people with whom Allah is wroth. Indeed, they despair of the hereafter, as the unbelievers despair of those in tombs. Now, the people whom Allah is wroth with are really Muhammad's enemies. And again, this is an example of Muhammad's alter ego being Allah. He's essentially justifying his own actions, including actions that violate treaties, that violate the tenets of his own supposed holy book. And he's justifying these things by he's justifying these things that would otherwise be seen as huge character flaws, particularly, but are basically things that help him. It's a very self-interested religion from the perspective of Muhammad. Every new revelation, everything that comes down, is designed for his benefit, to enhance his stature and power. So that's the upshot of this, the examined one. It's a surah which illustrates the fact that Muhammad broke treaties and that he wasn't trustworthy. And he's justifying it by saying that this woman, that Allah has sanctioned this. So in other words, Allah has sanctioned him breaking his word. But again, all of this is unscriptural, especially the part where he says that you should basically reciprocate hatred for hatred, and that you should treat people as they treat you, not treat others as you would not treat others as you would wish to be treated, or treat others according to how you should be treated, regardless of how they treat you. This is basically, at best, a negative version of the golden rule, but I don't think it even rises to that. It's just Muhammad using excuses to justify his own deceit. Anyway, That is Surah 60, and the next one is a pretty short surah. It's Surah 61, entitled The Ranks, and we'll go over that one soon. Anyway, thanks for everyone for showing up, even though it's kind of late, and I will see you next time.